Hi, so today is the last section of our last module, module 4, about writing. So today we will be talking about refining your paper and proofreading it. So let's talk about organizing argument. What do we mean by organizing argument and why do we need to do so? So the book Craft of Research, which is your textbook, says the best writers know better. What do you mean by that? Give it some thought. So I think, and also most researchers would agree, that you are basically not done once you churn out your draft. There is a lot to do when the draft is ready. You need to revise and refine it for the readers, because if when you go back to your research and read it, you might find a lot of pieces not connected or coherent, and you may need to go back and refine it in order for the readers to find it easy to read. And as a writer, you are constantly making decisions. So you are making decisions by thinking like a reader. So what do I mean by thinking like a reader? So say you are reading a research and you don't know anything about the research. And how would you be interested to keep reading it? And how would you think the research is relevant to your purpose once you get to read it? So you are actually not reading everything word by word. And so the readers for your research is not going to read everything word by word. So what they're trying to do is they are trying to make sense of it. And they're using that sense of the whole paper and try to interpret its part. What do I mean by that? So for example, if you are talking about, say, once again, let's give the example of traffic accidents. And if you are trying to find in your research that what are the different causes of the most traffic accidents in Huntsville, Alabama? So if you have already stated that, it's really clear that people are trying to find out the reason for traffic accidents in Huntsville, Alabama. So that's the sense of the whole. And now they're trying to break down its part as, how did you find that out in the first place and what data you have used? So first you have to introduce the readers very clearly and briefly what your problem is. Why is it important? Because life is important, and it's the raising number of traffic accidents in Huntsville, Alabama might be a big problem for safety and security of people in their day-to-day life, and how many traffic accidents are happening every day, what period of time. So you would be giving that context to begin with to make sure that you are not missing out the context of the research and showing the relevance of doing this research. And then once the reader gets it, they would be interested to read the other parts, like, what data sources that author may have used, or what is the method they have used. Is it showing something unique, or is it showing something interesting? Which period of time they have considered doing this? Did they make any comparison between the time now and before, so on and so forth? But if you are not hierarchically giving out these information, then the reader may lose the purpose of reading the paper and would not be intrigued to read it at all. So it's a good idea to revise the paper top down, meaning you have to systematically revise the paper, making sense of the whole, so that the readers get the sense of the global structure, and then move into the local sentences and words. So if you are too focused on the local structure, but you don't make sense as a whole, then the reader would not be understanding. And if you would have been wearing the reader's shoe, you would not be understanding a paper that you have no idea of what has been done. And sometimes as authors, we tend to forget, like I said, while describing the first point here, that we tend to forget how the reader is thinking. Because we are so familiarized with our research, we get so attached to those ideas and so familiar to those ideas, we think that, okay, the reader is supposed to know that. It's such a simple thing. But you are forgetting that you might have been using the data for the whole year or a couple years, and then you got so familiar with it that you might be missing out something obvious, or you might not be making sense to the reader when they are reading it, because you have forgotten to connect the pieces in a way that it will make sense to the reader. So, having said that, you need to revise the frame. So by revising the frame once again, let's understand this very clearly, that every section, subsection of the paper should have a frame. And even when you are writing a paragraph, you are having a frame. So the global and the local structure of the paper will have a frame, and the frame follows three principles: where your introduction ends, where your conclusion begins, what sentence in one or both states your main point. So it's very important that if you are beginning, say, a section, it should have its own introduction and conclusion. And also, there should be a sentence that connects, the introduction and the conclusion to the main point. No matter how big your paragraph is, people should not be lost that what is the purpose of this section or a paragraph. So it's very important that you give out the main point, in your frame of the research, and make sure that you have a context and you also put a conclusion in that paragraph so that people know what they actually found in that. And especially true when you are considering a section or a subsection as a whole. So you must be having some level of, conclusion or an introduction, and then the connection between the both, with the main point of the research, and that will help you to not get lost. So you have to revise the argument section by section, because you are going to read, it and ask yourself, is each reason supporting your main claim, the point of a section of its own? So you have to see that if every claim that you are making is making a section of its own or not. And if you also have to check if you strike the right balance between the reasons and the number of evidence that you are showing in the paper. So those two are very important as well. And then you need to revise the organization of the paper. So now you are actually making sure the readers will find the whole paper coherent. I said it a number of times, but this section I will repeat again, that the key terms in the paper that you defined previously. So you remember I talked about 5 key terms that you need to go through to identify that your readers should know, and you are trying to repeat those concepts throughout the paper. So try to see if you have actually used those key terms throughout the paper, because they won't be key terms if you are not using them more or less frequently throughout your paper. Are these three concepts or terms coming out through those explanations? Is the beginning of each section and subsection clearly signaled? Like if there is a beginning of a section and the end of a section or subsection, is it coming out that it's the beginning or it's the end? Is it coming out with a clear conclusion? Is it coming out with a clear context? So what I sometimes like to do is a tip there. I would sometimes use the introduction sentence as the main summary of that paragraph. So for example, if I'm trying to explain the research method, I would very first, tell them that I have used linear regression to do the predictive modeling and find the relationship between rainfall and traffic accidents. So people know there that I will be explaining a linear regression model that is looking at the relationship between traffic accidents and rainfall. So that's very clear, clearly signaled. And then in the next step, I will be reasoning that why I have used that method in the first place. And then what is the, outcome of my analysis, etc. And then you also need to carefully check that does each major section begin with word that signal how the section relates to the one before it. So it's a good idea to actually mention that, sometimes that in the previous section, you could say in the conclusion that, we found so and so, and then so in the next section, I'm going to address the method of this analysis, so you will know better how to conduct this type of analysis. So it's just a connecting sentence sometimes between the conclusion and introduction of the next section. So that makes the paper more coherent and easy to read, and the reader knows what they are expecting in the next section, and if at all they need to read through the next section or not. It's also important to be clear how each section relates to the whole. So if you are clear that, okay, my method section is actually talking about the research methods or the statistical models or, predictive models I have used in order to, answer the question, which is, whether now something is happening because of that or not. So you are actually connecting this section to the key research question or the whole research problem, then it becomes a little bit easier for the reader to stay in track. So, and then you can also check if the point of each section, stated in a brief introduction or in its conclusion. So, like I mentioned before, that each, section should have its own kind of introduction and conclusion, and that is going to highlight the main point of that section. So you have to be careful about that while you are revising and reorganizing your document. And then do terms that unify each section run through it. So like I said, that you need to use certain terms, certain words that would connect one section to the another and let the audience or the reader know what they're looking for in the next section. You need to check the paragraphs. So we have talked about that, but I would like to go a little bit more in depth that structuring paragraphs, are important. So within the sections or subsections, you will have several paragraphs, right? So you have to structure and arrange your paragraph so that they lead your readers through the conversation you are orchestrating. And while you are doing that, you have to keep in mind that the paragraphs are not too long because and they're not too short either. Because if you have too long paragraph, then the readers are losing focus. And if you have, very short paragraph, again, readers will think that what's the point of a new paragraph if you are continuing the same, topic or the same argument in the next paragraph. So wisely use paragraph break. As you would do when you talk. So for example, if you are conducting a conversation, you will stop, take a pause in between your conversation. Sometimes you are taking shorter pause, which is kind of a period in a sentence. And sometimes you are taking a longer pause when you are switching to a different topic. So similar to that, just think that you are making a conversation with the reader and try to use the same strategy to design your paragraph length. Checking citation is something that we do not do very carefully. So I need to, tell you that citations are extremely important in your research. Make sure that your key arguments are either backed by your data or a source such as a book, peer-reviewed journal, or a trustable blog. Be very careful that you are not spreading misinformation. So when I say trustable blog, I mean it could be a news article, it could be like a source that have been used by people. It can be a university source or such as Medium that has been used by people for different kinds of statistical research method. These are some examples, but it has to be a trustable source, and you should not spread any kind of misinformation by trusting a source that is not usually used by readers or experts in your field, and also any other research field. So they have to be carefully reviewed by you. Do not forget to cite sources because especially when you are making a claim, because if you do that, it could be considered to be plagiarism. And we do not encourage any type of plagiarism in the university, especially in the research class, where you claim something and it's not your own claim. You are not giving evidence for that claim, and you say that in a way that it's a claim, and you never cite it. So we will also give you some links about understanding what's plagiarism. And I'm sure you have learned about that in your other research methods course, but be very careful about, citing the sources whenever you are making any claim. And it's a good idea to use the citation tools I have introduced you in the module 2 when you were learning about literature review. So try to use any one of those tools to make it a really easy task. Sometimes you might find it really difficult to begin using any of the tool because it might be a steep learning curve. Then you might think, oh, I don't want to upload my PDF documents or organize my literature review and spend a lot of time doing that. But when you're using these tools in the end, when you are revising your draft or writing your paper, you would find that all the hard work you put in at the beginning is really coming handy at this moment. So you would have less trouble finding your citations, and then organizing them and styling them. So I would highly encourage you to use one of those citation tools if you can. And the last 3 tips. This is so important because every time we plan to do a good research, we can only be successful if we follow these 3 tips. Number 1, start your project early. In order to do that, we have laid out the modules in a way that you can begin your research project systematically and make progress systematically. So submit your assignments timely. If you do that, you are already in the path of success because the assignments are timed in a way that will give you enough time to do each of the tasks with the correct amount of time. Next, once you are done writing your first draft of the paper, ask someone to skim your paper. Ask a friend, any family member who understands your topic of research, at least, 50-60%. But even if they don't, and if you don't find anyone, at least try to ask someone who even do not have a remote understanding of your field. If you find anyone who wants to, skim your paper, do it. And ask them to summarize it to you, that what do they learn from, each of the section, even if they can, write a sentence or 2. And that would help you to know whether this paper is making sense to any reader. Because in the end, our research writing goal is to reach any audience and make sense. So that's very important. And the third is proofreading. While you are refining your paper, use tools such as Grammarly to proofread your paper, because if you don't do that, sometimes a well-written paper might be rejected because there are so many grammar errors, and you may not score enough, even though you have all your data, you have all your analysis, you have all your arguments, because you did not make those small changes. The reader or your instructor may not be happy to read the paper and may not be giving you the grade or the credits that you deserve. So keep these three things in mind, and also make sure you go through all the modules systematically as they're released, and do your assignments timely, and then you are already there for a successful senior project. So hope you enjoyed this class, and hope we will keep the discussion going and head towards a successful completion of this course. Thank you very much for being with me in this course. Wish you great success.